Hello, welcome to Toffee TV. It is the match preview, joined by Joe Thomas from the Echo to talk about a home game, Joe. Everton have lost 4 home games on the run this season. The positive thing going into this game, Joe, is this was the last time we won a home game was Bournemouth. The last time we kept a clean sheet was Bournemouth.
Yeah.
So I'm praying that history repeats itself, because sooner or later this team has got to start winning home games or it's going to be in massive trouble.
Yes, I mean, something's got to change, hasn't it? And the sooner it changes, the better. And they have to really see this as an opportunity. And it seems so strange being sitting here and saying that now, having passed up the ultimate golden opportunity that was Luton. You know, with all due respect to Luton, I mean, coming off the back of the week that they did have, going into that game against a team that, you know, I think most commentators have already consigned back to the Championship. It's not even a, are they going to stay up or not? It's, are they going to stay up and to keep it respectable? And you just thought, this is the chance. This is the chance to, we've got a foothold in the season, build on it. Another game against Bournemouth after that. Could go into the international break and then the derby, if not necessarily 4 wins on the bounce, but 3 wins and a draw maybe.
Yeah.
And just think how much the atmosphere would change around the place. That wouldn't be to say that even 10 points from this collection of 8 games would necessarily represent success.
No.
But at least would have given them the cushion that they need going into the next part of the season, where they've built up a little bit of a barrier between this and the relegation fight and things like that. So, I mean, it really is a huge game, isn't it?
That's what I mean. We were talking last week, and that was the thinking. It was, we just had 2 bonus results, if you like. If we could win 2 home games, then 10 points from the first 8 games. It's amazing, but it would have been mid-table.
They'd have caught up to where they,
Well, exactly. We would have also been like 6 points ahead of Luton.
Exactly.
You know, 6 whatever ahead of Bournemouth and things like that. And listen, if we could win on Saturday. Luton have got Spurs at home, so you'd expect Spurs to win that one. Everton can have a little cushion again, but the next block of fixtures are difficult for Everton. So we have thrown away a huge 3 points last week against a very limited and basic side. And I'd say that with all due respect to Luton. They haven't spent any money, but they did look very much like a Championship side on Saturday. And that's why the more galling thing about that game was second half was just so poor. You can have a bit of a lapse in the first half and let 2 goals in, and we got a goal back, and it was right, come out for that second half and really have a go at it. And I don't know about you, I was just so disappointed the way Everton approached that second half.
It was peculiar, because I thought the way that they finished the first half was good. To have gone 2-0 down, to have had that setback, and to show the resilience to then start, go back on the attack. Obviously, Luton started to sit back a bit deeper because they had something to protect. But first there was the Garner chance where he headed it against the bar, obviously should have scored, and then finally there came the Dominic Calvert-Lewin goal. And it really gave Everton the momentum going into half-time. And I wasn't nervous at half-time. I thought, you know what, carry on like that for another 45, 50, 55 minutes, however long the games are, then you certainly would have thought Everton would come out of the game with something. And you think that a win was on the, was still a possibility. And I took a degree of strength from the way in which, the most impressive thing to me about the Brentford win was the way in which Everton came out in the second half. They played so well for the first half an hour. They'd got the goal. They should have got more. They suffered the setback of conceding a goal against the run of play. And they could have crumbled in that second half. Instead, they came out, they played with an authority, a calmness, a maturity that seemed to suggest that they knew that they were the better side and there was 3 points for taking it, and they were calm with everything that they did. They were methodical. They played a certain way. They didn't panic when the goals didn't come, and they just kept it up. And 20 minutes into the second half, they got their reward, and they deserved it. They deserved it, and just like they deserved the win at Villa as well. And I thought, bearing in mind we had that as a template from the week before, and this was at home, and the crowd were behind them. They were behind them. And obviously this was against, again, with all due respect, lesser opponents. And having had the goal just before half-time, I thought, the conditions are here for a comeback. The importance of this game is so significant, it can't be lost on Everton players. There's an opportunity here for either the team as a whole or a handful of individual players to grab this game by the scruff of the neck and to dictate it. To come out the traps, to come out the shadows, and put in a 45-minute performance that could really give Everton a boost for this season. Instead, it just didn't happen, and that's a real concern because they had opportunities as well. And I think that, I wrote my match report for the Echo. Obviously would have gone up about half an hour after the game, and I started on this point. And 65 minutes in, Carlton Morris and Jared Brownthwaite were both receiving treatment. They collided in the air, and you thought, even at that point, I didn't think anyone was panicking because it's like there was still 20, 25, half an hour left, maybe even more.
Yeah.
And you looked at it and you just thought, well, there's still plenty of time here for this group of players. But I looked around the group of players, and Amadou Onana came to speak to, came down to the touchline. He was the only one. No one else came to get instructions, nor did the coaching team bring anybody in to take instructions. I was looking around on the pitch, a handful of 1 or 2 conversations between players, but there were a lot of hands on hips.
Yeah.
And that was a moment really where you needed somebody, you needed a personality to go, look lads, all right, last 20 minutes hasn't quite worked. Let's write it off. Let's start again now. We've still got ages left in this game. Nothing. 1
becomes 2. Yeah, I was surprised with the manager's changes, to be honest. Not necessarily. I didn't think he should have took Idrissa Gana Gueye off, but he did, and we lost the midfield. Didn't lose it because Luton didn't do anything, but we didn't have the same measure of control. But I was more surprised that when he put Jack Harrison on, he didn't put Nathan Patterson on behind him, who would have overlapped. And I've done a bit of this, and again, talked about it a lot today, is that I can almost plot Everton's inability to win home games back to Luca Dean leaving and Seamus Coleman simply getting older. Since we've lost Luca Dean and Seamus has got older and not been there all the time, go and have a look at Everton's home wins. They dropped off because we've replaced them. Michalenko's a more defensive fullback, and the right back has been whatever. Seamus playing injured, or with Ben Godfrey there, or Patterson's been in and out. And at home is where your fullbacks are hugely important. And this is what I just didn't get it with Sean Dyche, why he didn't have Patterson to overlap Harrison. And I would have personally been really brave and took Michalenko off, dropped Dwight McNeil to left back, and had Dan Juma ahead of him. Maybe not at half time, but certainly with 20 minutes left, and really forced Luton back because they were no threat. They broke once, and funnily enough, they had the ball in the net, but they were offside. It was the only time they really come over the halfway line, and that just surprised me. But you're right, it was that last 20 just was flat, and it was almost, we were out of hope. And I don't think, moving to this Saturday, I don't think we can approach this game just out of hope. There has to be a more attacking, adventurous lineup, I think, and a way of playing. And that will involve fullbacks getting beyond our wide players. We've put James Garner out on the right. I don't get it personally. It just doesn't work. Away from home, maybe. I don't mind Everton being nice and tight and compact. But I think at Goodison, where your majority of fans are, let's be honest. And despite some accusations that they can't play at Goodison because the crowd are difficult, they weren't difficult last Saturday. It was, if anything, it was just quiet.
And in fairness to Sean Dyche, he made that clear as well. Like this myth about it being a difficult place. Obviously, we know there are times that it can be. And
that's
fans
frustration,
have been completely justified in that so many times over recent years. But Saturday wasn't one of those moments. And it is, I mean, you talk about the fullback situation. For me, the change that didn't surprise me, but it frustrated me a little bit, was bringing Beto on to play 4-4-2 Beto and Calvert-Lewin. I don't really see how that works as a cohesive game plan.
It doesn't if you're not overlapping, because you're not creating. All we did, sorry to butt in, all we did was we just played straight. So we put 2 of them that weren't next to each other, by the way, if you look where they are, and we just hit long straight balls at them. And it was like, what do you want them to do?
Long straight balls at them from centre-back.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
More difficult. So I mean, I understand the width, but like I just see Calvert-Lewin and Beto as a type of partnership that I think fans love the idea of it working. It could be a beautiful chaos. There will be times when it does work. But really, I think that if you want to use a little bit of cohesion and intelligence around it, if you're going to play 2 up front, it's got to be Dan Juma off one of them.
Maybe,
and you can play one for an hour and one for 40 minutes with the length of games this season. It almost felt like a concession that there wasn't the guile to break this team down. We're going to put the 2 big lads up. Then the problem with that was, because of the way in which they were played to, rather than stay up top, you then had Dominic Calvert-Lewin dropping deep to fill in the void, where Everton don't have a midfielder that's kind of a number 10, a proper number 10, who can have the ball 30 yards from the opposition's goal and take a little bit of time on it and find the pass through. They don't have that.
No.
Yeah, they don't have that plan B, basically.
What do you think about the possibility of doing what he kind of did at Villa then? At times, to get, if you are going to have the two big men through the middle, if you were going to have it, going to a three at the back, and with three in midfield, having maybe a Dan Juma then off them, or a Dwight McNeil off them in that role, get the width from the fullbacks, but you've got three at the back. Because I think at Villa, I know it was a little bit more 3-4-3 than a 3-5-2, but that does give you another way of playing, doesn't it? And Luton did, of course, play with the three at the back. So I was wondering if that'll ever come into his thinking, with maybe McNeil at left wing back and maybe Garner at right wing back, or Patterson at right wing back. I wonder if he'd ever look at that. But you're right, it was the way we played it on Saturday, it just didn't work, did it?
I mean, it's interesting because the Villa formation came out of the blue and it was very, very effective. It was effective against a Villa side who I think, whilst they obviously would have wanted to win, had a talented side out there, they did make changes. I think, and I think they probably were caught by surprise by the tactics. They probably caught, I don't think it was necessarily the tactics that caught Villa out. I think it was the hunger and the desire and the determination, the intensity.
Yeah.
And for me, almost the theme of this Everton side at the moment is that when it beats teams, it doesn't tend to beat them as a result of tactics. It kind of tends to beat them as a result of physicality and mentality. When you get a team that's having an off day, that isn't prepared for Everton, that isn't willing to fight for everything, that doesn't have a lot riding on the game maybe, or might have just had a European fixture, they might have changes in the squad, they might have things. When Everton have had their success under Sean Dyche, it's because they've started really, really quickly and got the early goals. You think Brentford at home, goal after a minute. You think, obviously, Brighton away, goal after a minute. You look at, obviously, Villa the other day, even Brentford, early goals. This is a side that can overwhelm teams if they're not prepared for them. The problem is twofold. One, a lot of teams are prepared for them, and when it becomes a tactical game, they have the resources to outplay Everton quite often. And the second thing is Everton's finishing, because we can talk about Dyche's setup of teams and things like that altogether. I mean, we're already talking about the setup against Luton the other day. Well, should have gone 1-0 up after 15 minutes. They did have the chances. Just like against Fulham, just like against
Well, that
Wolves.
was what I was going to say. You're absolutely spot on, and the manager, and I know he's quoted in a press conference, the highest XG or whatever. But at what point does that become a concern? Because if we keep doing the same thing and keep getting the same result, isn't that the biggest, the sign of insanity?
It is, although I would say that the repetition perhaps hasn't been as prolonged as we think it has, because I think when you look at the issue against Fulham and against Wolves, obviously it's the same issue that we had against Luton. But obviously there has been an attempt to make a difference in there, because Beto's come in and also Dominic Calvert-Lewin has come back to fit. So now Everton are doing the same thing but with better players and more options. Obviously it still didn't work against Luton, but it's not quite this, albeit it's the same template, it's template but with better players. So you would hope that the change would come. The problem that Everton have got as the season goes on, and hoping that those things will change. Dyche seems to be hoping that eventually the stats will continue to trend in the same direction, but the luck will change. I mean, the worry is that the stats go in the opposite direction, because as we get deeper into the season, more and more teams who perhaps weren't prepared for how Everton were going to play can find out and predict how Everton are going to play and therefore counter it. And similarly, the standard of opposition is going to get better, because one of the most frustrating things about this run of 7 games, 8 with Bournemouth, is that there were so many opportunities to get points on the board. Fulham at home, Wolves at home, Luton at home. When you look at Bournemouth at home as well, now
Sheffield United.
You had Sheffield United away, which I think was always going to be a difficult game, bearing in mind how important that was going to be to their season. But was still a game that Everton should go in looking for, trying to get a win out of. Certainly not approaching with any fear. The danger is that it's all well and good saying the underlying performance have been good and the stats point in the right direction, but you haven't got points in the board. It's only going to become harder getting into the season. And these are teams that Everton have failed to beat or even get a point off at home that probably are going to finish in the bottom 6 or 7 this season.
Yeah.
And we know that as soon as a better team comes, that tactic doesn't work, because it's not like you could say Arsenal came and then Everton peppered them for the first 20 minutes and could have scored 2. They didn't lay a glove on them.
Anything.
And it, sadly, it may well be a similar story if Man City come to town, which they're still yet to do. If Newcastle comes to town, which they're still yet to do, and
Liverpool,
4 or 5 other clubs
yeah.
as well. So I mean, that's another of the problems. And I think a real concern for Everton is that even if they win against Bournemouth, if they come from 7 points from these 8 games, that opportunity to create a cushion that would at least get them through the next 6 weeks after this international break without necessarily the Wolves being at the door, buy everyone a little bit of time to settle in, find alternative formations, alternative positions for players, work on them. Things like get Harrison back to fitness, McNeil up to full fitness, Calvert-Lewin up to full fitness, get Beto and the players around him on a wavelength, get Harrison and Calvert-Lewin on a wavelength. That opportunity the space that they should have created to give them a little bit of time to work on that without the pressure, it's gone. And it's gone even if they beat Bournemouth. 7 points still isn't necessarily a good haul from this.
No.
It might provide a win would be good, and it would kind of change the mood and calm it for a couple of weeks. But there isn't a way in which there isn't a lot of pressure going into the 3 games after the international break. And, for all the potential that Everton have got to play well and take points from them, Liverpool away, Brighton at home, West Ham away, I think if we look at where those 3 clubs are at this moment and we look at where Everton are at the minute, Everton could play to the very best of their abilities and still struggle against those 3 sides because they just have got more about them.
Let's have a look at the Everton side that started against Luton at the weekend. At some stage, there it is. Ashley Young, Tarkowski, Branthwaite, Michalenko, Dobak, Garner, Amadou Onana, Trisha Garner, Gay, Dwight McNeil, Adelaide Corey, Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Do you envisage any change from that this weekend?
I think so. I didn't have a problem with that starting lineup. I thought the Garner situation was difficult. He got caught in a little bit of a trap in the fact that Garner had been so good in Brentford and Villa, albeit away from home.
At home he struggled.
But so good in those 2 games, it was very difficult to drop him. But then the problem is, do you then break up the midfield 3, which is clearly Dyche's favoured 3?
Yeah, that's his favourite 3.
Do you break that up again, and put Garner in the middle? Do you keep him out? And again, whilst it's easy with hindsight to look at tactics and the way he set that side up, obviously that first 15 minutes, 20 minutes, they should have scored. And then all of a sudden the game becomes a different game. But I don't think he should necessarily stick with the same one going. I think after what we've just seen, I think that there would be legitimate calls for change. Bournemouth are an interesting side because they are better than Luton. And the Iraola side, they will look to have more possession and they'll look to press higher at the pitch. And in some ways that might help Everton because if they can beat that press, if they can get beyond it, there might be opportunities for them to hit on the counter, which is what they want to do. That's what they're most effective at.
Absolutely, yeah.
But obviously, again, they've just got to take the chances when they come.
Let's have a look at Bournemouth's starting lineup. They were beaten 4-0 at home by Arsenal last week. Still without a victory, of course. Neto, you've got Max Aarons, Zabani, Senesi, Kirk as a left back, Christie and Cook in the middle, and Tavernier, Billing, Clivert and Solanke. They've still also got Uatara and Sinister. I'm not sure if they're fit, but they're in their squad as well. And they've got no wins so far, which is not great for Everton when Everton's the next up. But like I said before, obviously we were the last victory we got at Goodison was against them, the last clean sheet. One player we're going to have to keep an eye on is former Liverpool player Dominic Solanke. This is his numbers so far this season: 7 games played, 3 goals from an XG of 2.96. So essentially scoring what he should. He's averaging 2.6 shots per game and has got 1 assist, and there's his heat map, which is basically everywhere all over the pitch. And he always likes a game against Everton. But from our perspective, as disappointing as it's been, and it's been dreadful, let's not dress it up. 4 defeats out of 4 home games is shocking. I in my many years watching Everton, I've never seen Everton lose 7 out of 8 home games. It's the worst run I can ever remember, playing some of the worst football I've ever seen as well in that time. This is we've got the chance to start again at the weekend and get the 3 points. We've just got to get on that front foot. And these are the team that haven't won a game Everton are above them at the moment, and if Everton were to win, we'll put a 4-point cushion between them
huge.
going into the break. So it does represent a good opportunity, Joe, albeit it will be a very tough match for Sean Dyche's men to get this win at Goodison and try to break that before, obviously, next opponents here at Brighton, which will be another very, very difficult game.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, it does represent an opportunity. I mean, I think Bournemouth have kind of gone about it a slightly different way to Everton in terms of, obviously, they haven't got their win yet. They have drawn 3 of the 4 games, haven't they? So there is a degree of stubbornness. And they, of course, went to Brentford and came very close to winning. It was a late equaliser from Brentford. And it's difficult to kind of know what to do. Not what to do. It's difficult to know how to interpret this game, really, because obviously there's a lot riding on it for both sides. Huge amount riding on it for both sides. You look at that Bournemouth squad and they do have attacking options, and that's, Cliver. I quite like the look of Cliver.
Yeah.
Solanke is a predictable threat, and you would like to think that for Branthwaite and Tarkowski, he's someone that they would feel relatively comfortable dealing with. Unfortunately, we saw at the weekend that everybody knew exactly what Carlton Morris was going to do, and they still struggled to deal with it. So that's a bit of an issue. But I would be relatively confident of them being able to do the job against Solanke. My problem is probably the player I worry about a little bit is Billing, who's been so effective for them, since they come back into the Premier League. It just, that having that strength and authority in the middle of the pitch, and if Everton's centre midfield isn't on it, and there is this problem where Everton they have a physically strong central midfield, but they don't have necessarily a positionally disciplined centre midfield. That there isn't, for all the calls that Anana could be it, there isn't really a natural number 6 there. And one thing that Everton have struggled, and this outdates Dyche, because remember, I mean, most vivid memory of this is Villa away last season. Is they struggle in transition. They keep struggling in transition. You're having the awareness of a centre midfielder having an awareness to pick up the run of someone like a Billing is severely lacking. And if it becomes a bit of an end-to-end game, that's a problem. And also they've got options out wide, and Everton's fullbacks are having intriguing seasons. Is probably
that's a lovely way to put it, Joe. A lovely way, very diplomatic way to put it. Our fullbacks have been in better form, I think we could say.
Yeah.
But we've got to, like I said, right at the very start of this year, we've simply got to start winning home games. Otherwise, there's only one way this ends up. Every team that stayed up has always got home wins. Sean Dyche got 3, was it last season? Arsenal, Leeds, and Bournemouth. 4 he got in, and that was, luckily that was just about enough to keep us up. Frank Lampard had already got 3, I think, before was it 3? Was it West Ham or 2? West Ham and Palace. That was it too. So, 6 home wins is absolutely scandalous. But we have got to start winning, like you just said. The level of opposition's going up another level, which, okay, could work one way. You're not expected to win, and that frees you, and you can almost play like an away style at home. But I think for most teams who do keep themselves away from trouble, the home form is the thing that does it, and Everton cannot continue to struggle with it. And it's Saturday at do or die for Dyche, or are we not there in your opinion just yet?
Don't think we're there.
Yeah.
Quite yet.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. Any manager that loses 5 consecutive home games and against the nature of opposition, that is clearly troubling.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of kind of external circumstances that come into effect when it comes to looking at Dyche, and I think, in fairness to him, some of that has to be just the lack of support that he's got from in the transfer window, and that continued even into this season. It was clear that players were effectively being sold from beneath his feet. I don't think he was particularly enamoured at the loss of Alex Iwobi on transfer deadline day, and I think that, however you look at it, it feels like there was a miscalculation over Damari Gray. The way in which that was handled, like it feels as if there was an attempt to go, okay, well, if Iwobi's going, there might be an opportunity to reintegrate Damari Gray, and all right, he might not be Sean Dyche's favourite player, but we saw how that played out, and it looked like there was an intent to try and keep him and work with him, and obviously that lost. So all of a sudden he loses 2 attacking players for nothing coming in, and that's before you get into the Mopé departure and the Tom Cannon departure, which Mopé, I think we can understand.
Mm.
Tom Cannon is one that I kind of still feel really I feel sad about that, because I think it's a really kind of damning indictment of where the club is at right now. Because I think the fans of most clubs, what they love more than anything is seeing the local lad come through the system and have a chance to do well. That pathway, it's a pathway which Kevin Falwell was brought in to try and create, but again, obviously hasn't really been given the conditions through which you could do that. Yeah, but Tom Cannon, being a lad with a proven goal scoring record at mid-table championship level already, selling him at this stage in his career really did feel a bit of a shame, albeit arguably the deal was a good one. But I think it just is a very good indicator as where Everton is as a club right now, and how sad that is. I think. But anyway, going back to Dyche, I think all those type of things have to be taken into consideration. You look at the side that he started the season with. I've got to be honest, I still look at that Fulham game, and I still don't really understand how he got out of that side into a position where it should have won the game in the first place. You look how many injuries, how thin the squad was, and he still created a side that should have had that game out of sight before the goal that went the other way. That's not me saying that I necessarily think that everything's working fine, or me saying that he's got a blank check to continue on regardless. Of course, there's none of that. But Everton, as a club on and off the pitch, have enough problems to deal with at the moment. And particularly when you look at his track record, he has to have some credit in the bank for keeping up Everton last season. I think he did well to do that. Obviously, people bring style and excitement and things like that into it, and that does matter. This is Everton Football Club. There should be a pride about the way this team plays and an ambition about it. But there also probably has to be a degree of pragmatism at the moment, and I think from financial perspectives, who else you would get in, who's even making the decisions. I think all of them would point towards Dyche having a little bit more time, even if the worst was to happen at the weekend. The problem that Dyche has got, and he would probably be approaching this point if they were to lose to Bournemouth, is at some point the argument becomes less about who do you bring in who can do a better job, and the argument becomes, well, actually, could anybody be doing a worse job? And that sounds more critical than I want it to sound.
I understand what you're saying,
but even if you think that there are things that he is doing well, and even if you think there are things that he just can't be held responsible for because of everything else around the club, which is clearly undermining him. 5 home defeats from 5 is troubling for any club in any situation.
8 out the last 9.
And if that was come the other side of the international break, there would be pressure going into some games that you'd rather not have pressure in. You look at Anfield, not been a happy hunting ground for some time, and there's been the death knell for a few managers over recent years. You look at Brighton, probably put in the performance that should have seen Frank Lampard go last season.
Yeah, correct.
You look at West Ham, the game after which he did go.
See Frank Lampard go.
I mean,
Joe, you're supposed to be cheering me up here.
I wish I could, but anyway, I mean, very long-winded answer. There's so much around it, but for me, I don't think Dyche is quite there yet. And I think that whilst people will point to an extraordinary run of results, I think that these are also extraordinary times, and I think that as a result of that, I think he deserves a bit more time as a result of that.
The easiest thing is just to win the game, isn't it?
Win the game and then
start
that
winning.
Change,
the noise calms down, people can relax a little bit.
And like you said earlier, beat Bournemouth with the way that they've started the season. 7 points from 8 games is bad, but at least there's a 4-point buffer there.
Be a 4-point.
Probably
Spurs,
Luton,
I think, will beat Luton.
Sheffield United, maybe Burnley. Bournemouth.
Burnley have got Chelsea, so Everton could
3-4 points. There could be a gap there because, and that's something else also.
We'd all sleep a little bit easier if we've got a gap.
And that's something also has to be borne in mind. I think a little bit that I do think that Everton do need to do less this season than perhaps any other point in recent years.
That can't be a bar, though.
That can't be a bar, but it has to be a consideration when you look at just how just how.
We're in a mess, Joe. Let's be
well,
honest.
it has to be a bar when
Everything's
you
a
look at how problematic the run of sacking managers each
Mm.
season has been already. That has only hindered Everton going back, and it's a cycle that surely you want to avoid, especially now that you look at who's been brought in this squad, and you look at that striker axis of Calvert-Lewin, Beto, Chamiti. This side only really has one way of playing.
Got to create more chances.
Yeah.
Get crosses in. You've got to. I accept all of that. The one thing I would say, and I used it for every single manager, is you can't keep the wrong manager in a job though, because you don't want to sack another manager.
That's fair.
And Frank Lampard I like Frank, but he deserved to be sacked when he did. Rafa Benitez, I didn't like, but he deserved to be sacked when he did. He couldn't argue. Didn't win enough games of football. If Everton keep losing home games, Sean Dyche will have no argument, regardless of the chaos that is at Everton at the moment. The easiest way to just dampen this whole thing down, just win on Saturday, please, Everton. Go out, just get the win, and we can all have a couple of weeks where we can smile. There's a lovely little gap between us and the bottom three. We can puff our chests out a little bit, but it'll be tough. It'll be tough.
At that point, you could point to 3 wins in the last 4 and say,
exactly,
there is progress.
Exactly.
They need to make Luton the blip.
Yeah.
That's what they need to do.
Yeah,
They need to go out
absolutely.
on Saturday and they need to say, you know what, Luton was the blip in this 4-game period. Brentford and Villa wasn't the blip.
No, that
You
was
know?
our norm.
Like,
That's
that
our
was-
new norm.
Yeah, exactly.
So, fingers crossed. Let us know what you think in the comment section. Look, big thanks to Joe. Give us your score predictions.
What's yours?
I'll be honest, this is probably a good thing. For the first time this season in a home game, I'm not confident at all.
Yeah.
But I did think we'd win 3-1. I didn't think 3-0 because we don't keep clean sheets. I thought it'd be 3-1 last week to Everton and we lost. So I'm going with, I'm not confident. So I'm hoping that that's the crying it in bit and Everton get the win that we need. I'll say anything at this stage. Absolutely anything. Thanks for watching. See you later.